On December 17, 1903, at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, the Wright brothers' Wright Flyer became the first powered, heavier-than-air machine to achieve controlled, sustained flight with a pilot aboard. This monumental achievement ushered in over a century of aviation firsts, advancements in technology, and a litany of courageous flyers who took to the skies in pursuit of glory, honor, and victory in the face of great evil. The mighty wings of the aircraft these aviators flew could never be overshadowed by the sacrifices they endured and the dreams they made a reality. The story of American military aviation does not limit itself to any one branch of service, nor does it limit itself to a particular strategic vision or doctrine. Rather, it is a cumulative efforts of soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen in the air, on land, and on the sea, answering their nation's call from the skies above, to the trenches, the mud, and the sand, and from the echoes of ships at sea. From every clime and place, brothers and sisters in arms were creating a legacy of valor and distinction that would carry well into the future. The story of Marchfield is their story, our story, America's story. The Alessandro plane was little more than a sparse-aired field of barley at the close of 1917. Yet, through the diligence of Riverside citizens, in just a few short months, it would become an Army aviation field. In early February 1918, a crew of enlisted men, led by an experienced Sergeant Charles E. Garlick, arrived from nearby Rockwell Field, San Diego. Their task was to establish a camp and get the field ready for cadet flights. On the morning of March 1, 1918, the newly opened Alessandro Aviation Field met its first flyer, Aviation Cadet Harold Compre. Sergeant Garlick served as the installation commander until the arrival of Captain William J. Carruthers on March 11, 1918. The newly formed team had only 90 days to build a base suitable to train pilots for the air war in Europe. In a rapid turn of events, only a month later, Alessandro Aviation Field was renamed March Field on March 20, 1918, in honor of First Lieutenant Peyton C. March, Jr., who had lost his life in a training accident 5 weeks earlier. On March 23, 1918, the War Department published the order officially establishing the installation. By June of that same year, 640 acres of grain stubble had been cleared and leveled. That same month, Captain Carruthers passed command to Major John C.P. Bartoff, who assumed command of the flying school. The school consisted of 5 aero squadrons, with each having about 250 cadets, and 19 JN-4 Jenny aircraft. Initial curriculum saw students attending ground training courses at the University of California, Berkeley. Primary flight training then occurred at March Field, followed by more advanced courses at nearby Rockwell Field. The Aviation School at March Field graduated its first class on August 3, 1918. About 500 to 750 aviators would graduate every 3 months. March Field was quickly becoming a bastion for aviation training, destined for a fantastic legacy. And yet, like many grand visions, the realities of a world in flux and the politics that responds to it is oftentimes what determines the future of a base, and March Field would be no different. 11 November 1918, Armistice Day, and the end of World War I. The war had claimed millions and would set the stage for future conflicts throughout the 20th century. Wartime training at March Field officially concluded on 14 December 1918. Demobilization of March Field occurred quickly thereafter. On April 4, 1923, the gates of March Field closed, to be manned by its caretaker, Master Sergeant William J. Anderis, and his mother. The interwar years of the 1920s and 30s bore witness to aviation pioneers like Hap Arnold, Toohey Spatz, Benjamin Fallot, Billy Mitchell, and numerous other aviators pushing the boundaries of military aviation and challenging the concept of what air power meant and could accomplish. On July 2, 1926, An act of Congress, the Air Corps Act, redesignated the Army Air Service to the Army Air Corps. March Field reopened on March 6, 1926, with a new lease on life and a legacy to reestablish. Colonel William C. Gardenhire arrived in March of 1927 to oversee the new construction. Much of the construction would mirror the Mission Revival style of the famous Mission Inn, the same place where the first cadets of March Field courted their young ladies. Major Millard F. Harmon arrived in August of that same year and would command the flying school and the post. The 1930s marked the golden age of March Field. Hollywood celebrities, famous aviators, and military legends visited, trained at, and commanded the base. Perhaps the most prominent of these individuals was General Henry H. or Hap Arnold. Hap Arnold was a major when he took command of the post and the 1st Bombardment Wing in 1931. He would leave in January of 1936 as the first general officer to command the post. General Arnold was a champion of air power and fought for an independent air arm, a dream that was realized with the creation of the Air Force in 1947. General Arnold would go on to become the only 5-star general of the Air Force. Some of the famous aviators that visited or called March Field home included General Henry Hap Arnold, Amelia Earhart, General Hoyt Vandenberg, General Nathan Twining, General Howell Estes Jr., Captain Colin Kelly Jr., General Bernard Schriever, General Curtis LeMay, and General Carl Toohey Spatz.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The facts of yesterday and today speak for themselves. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
During World War II, March Field served as a training installation for flyers heading overseas. An auxiliary to March Field, Camp Hahn, also served as an Army anti-aircraft training facility and would later serve as a prisoner of war camp and finally as a debarkation hospital. The installation also produced 2 Medal of Honor recipients, First Lieutenant Donald J. Gott and Second Lieutenant William E. Metzger. These heroes had attempted to fly their heavily damaged B-17 Flying Fortress back to friendly territory in an attempt to save the life of a severely injured crew member. Both men were awarded the medal posthumously for their actions. During the war, actor and comedian Bob Hope made multiple visits to March Field. In fact, Mr. Hope conducted what was considered the first USO show from the base gymnasium on May 6, 1941. Nearly 4,500 personnel fell out to view the shows, as a second was added for those unable to see the first. Those first jokes at March Field cemented a legacy of entertaining millions of troops and their families around the world. On April 24, 1943, 2 companies of Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, or WAC, arrived at March Field. WACs worked side by side with their male counterparts, working on aircraft, in administrative functions, and other details essential to the war effort. March Field was also one of the first Army Air Forces installations to receive Women's Army Service Pilots, or WASPs. In January of 1944, Patty M. Canada became the first WASP to arrive at March Field for training. Eventually, 26 such pilots would be permanently assigned and many more would cycle through for training. These female aviators towed targets, performed daylight and nighttime tracking missions, carried out radio control work, and practiced laying smoke. March Field WASPs also performed ferry missions, moving cargo and aircraft. Little more than a year after arriving at March, in July of 1950, the same month the Korean conflict erupted, the 22nd Bombardment Wing was ordered to Kadena Air Base, Okinawa, Japan, for combat duty. 10 days later, the unit's B-29s had dropped their first bomb loads over North Korea. The B-29s of the 22nd continued their tactical bombardments, hitting bridges, railroads, troop concentrations, and various other targets on the front lines. By the close of October 1950, all the major targets for the unit's heavy bombers had been destroyed, and the 22nd returned to March Air Force Base. The first bombing raid over Vietnam by a winged Stratofortress was launched on November 11, 1966. The 22nd Bombardment Wing participated in further bombing missions during partial deployments. In early 1967, March Air Force Base's bomber, tanker, and numerous support assets deployed to various strategic air command units involved in the direct combat operations in Southeast Asia. The 22nd deployed to Guam from April through September of 1967 in support of the Southeast Asia conflict. Around-the-clock operations continued as strike orders were received. Each crew on a single sortie dropped 70,000 pounds of bombs on the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese with an accuracy of 99.6%. By the close of their deployment, wing crews had flown more than 3,000 missions. On January 27, 1973, a ceasefire was announced. Within 60 days, all surviving American POWs were released. The Air Force Regional Hospital at March was chosen as one of the facilities to welcome and care for returning POWs. Under Operation Homecoming, 52 airmen processed home through March, 5 of them from the 22nd Bombardment Wing. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, March field units and personnel participated in various operations. From Operation Urgent Fury on the island of Grenada in the latter part of 1983, to Operation Just Cause, the invasion of Panama and the removal of General Manuel Noriega in January of 1990. From the sands of the Middle East to Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm, to Operation Restore Hope in Somalia, Team March would deploy troops, provide aerial refueling, and transport massive amounts of cargo and personnel. Over the years, Team March has also provided relief when natural disasters struck. From resupplying Hopi and Navajo Native American communities in January of 1932 to Hurricane Sandy in 2012, from wildfires in this state and others, and earthquakes in Japan and elsewhere, Team March has been there. The early 1990s witnessed the end of the Cold War. For March, this meant policy planners would focus on cost-saving initiatives. A base realignment and closure commission would evaluate the closing of military installations. By mid-March 1993, the Department of Defense announced its recommendations to the commission. For March, this meant significant changes. The base's current active-duty flying mission would end in 1995. The then 452nd Air Refueling Wing and the California National Guard's 163rd Air Refueling Group would remain. The 22nd Air Refueling Wing would move to McConnell Air Force Base in January of 1994. March Air Force Base had become March Air Reserve Base. While many changes had and would come to the base, the members of Team March would push forward, finding new ways to do more with less, while always continuing to accomplish the mission.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation.
Just as the March field of December 7, 1941 had mobilized after an attack, so would March Air Reserve Base after September 11, 2001. Together, we stand upon the footprints of those pioneers that have come before us, choosing to walk in their footsteps, not because the path is easy or righteous, rather, it's our duty to honor their legacy. And when the footsteps grow faint and the fog thickens, perhaps we stop to look down. It is then that we find strength in the realization that we did not walk upon the footsteps, but rather beside, taking the path of duty and of honor together, walking with our brothers and sisters in arms towards that distant horizon, confident in ourselves and each other, and at peace knowing that together we have built a legacy for the future.
The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it. And one path we shall never choose, and that is the path of surrender or submission. Our goal is not the victory of might, but the vindication of right. Not peace at the expense of freedom, but both peace and freedom here in this hemisphere, and we hope around the world. God willing, that goal will be achieved. Thank you and good night.